There's some pretty big news in the world of running a click and tracks and automating lyrics and lights in worship. Recently, both Loop Community and Multitracks, the maker of the Prime app and the Playback app, respectively, announced a MIDI out feature for both of the apps. And that means you can now use these apps to send MIDI cues to apps like ProPresenter or Lightkey or Proclaim, or really any other app out there that can receive a MIDI command. You can send these MIDI commands to these different production apps and automate things like lyrics, lights, patch changes, and so on. So in this video, I'm gonna give you a comparison of the Prime and Playback app and their MIDI output features. We're gonna take a look at what the workflow looks like in building out your automation cues in both of these apps. And then we're gonna discuss if it's worth switching from Ableton Live if you're already building out your projects and sessions and automation in Ableton, if it's worth switching to one of these apps. So stick around because I'll be answering all these questions and we'll take an in-depth look at all of these features coming up. My name is Jake Goslin. I'm the creator of churchfront.com, helping you lead gospel-centered and tech-savvy worship. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of our latest content to help you grow yourself and grow your worship ministry. And be sure to download our worship ministry toolkit where we list out all of our recommended gear and software for your ministry. We link the toolkit below this video. I am a huge proponent of automating things in worship because number one, it eliminates a lot of distracting mistakes with missed lyric cues. Number two, it also expands your creative capability. So even when you have a small team, you can still pre-plan out all these great cues that happen with your displays or with your lighting gear, and you can just really be creative and craft a compelling experience for your congregation. Until recently, Ableton Live was really the only and best way to go about having full automation with your tracks rig. But the teams of both Loop Community and Multitracks have been working hard behind the scenes to add this feature to their app. It's now available, and here are my first impressions. So over here, I have my iPad Pro running the Playback app and the Prime app simultaneously. On this other computer, I have it running ProPresenter, so you can see this in action. So let's take a look at Playback. I'll go ahead and I'm gonna press play, but you'll see underneath the timeline here, these little yellow and orange arrows. So those are the cues for both lyrics and lighting that we have set up in both ProPresenter, and then also Lightkey I have running on this song as well. So let's go ahead and I'm just gonna hit play here and you'll see it in action. So you see it cued the title slide of King of My Heart. There's a clear all cue that just went in there. And then so on. It is able to automate those lyric changes, which is awesome. It also automates the lighting changes. So I'll go here where there's a lighting change. The yellow cues, I believe, are the lighting changes. So it's pretty awesome. It works really slick in the Playback app. Now let's take a look at the Prime app. I'm gonna pull up the song Another in the Fire because that's the song I was building out cues here in the Prime app. So I'll go ahead, I'll zoom in, and then let's go ahead and I'll just start here like at the beginning of the verse. I'll press play. You'll see these green MIDI cues. There's a grace when the heart is under fire, and so on. It'll switch the cues. Every time it hits that green MIDI cue in Prime here, it's gonna pull up the right slide in ProPresenter. So as you can see, this MIDI output feature, it works. This is gonna be a really great way for some folks to get started with automation in their worship gatherings. So here are the issues I have when it comes to the workflow behind these apps and the way that they've integrated these features. And maybe they're gonna make some tweaks and changes. They probably will make tweaks and changes in the future for this, but that's my biggest concern is just the way that you're gonna go about actually building out these cues in each of the apps. So what I wanted to do is just walk you through what this workflow is gonna look like for each one. So first, let's start with the Playback app. So you'll see here in the Playback app, I have all these MIDI cues that are on the bottom of the timeline here under the audio waveforms, which is awesome. The downside is I can't actually edit those cues within inside the app. I need to go to the Playback or the Multitracks cloud software that runs on my laptop. So here I am in the back end of my multitracks.com account, and I'm go to the song King of My Heart. A lot of my songs, some are in multitracks.com, a lot of them are in Loop Community, Kind of adds to the headache of which app I would use if I were using either one of these apps to automate. But when I'm looking at the song in their cloud, now you go to this new tab in the song called MIDI. Takes a second to load, and then once it loads, you have all of the various cues. So it shows the note, octave, velocity, and then it shows the timing of that cue in the app. And then you can also look through different buses for your MIDI cues. So I have lyrics here, then I have lights here. So these are all the lighting cues for the song King of My Heart. So there's a couple ways that you'll go about building your cues for these songs. So the first way, what I did for King of My Heart, this is the easiest way, is I actually have this song in an Ableton session. So because I've been automating things with Ableton for a long time, I was able to go to the song King of My Heart here. What I did, here are my lyric cues, and then here are my lighting cues down here. I consolidated these cues into one clip for lyric cues, and then I consolidated them into one clip for lighting cues, and then I exported those MIDI clips from Ableton Live, and then I went in and I hit this upload MIDI file to both the lyrics and lights MIDI buses for this song, and then within a couple seconds the cues are there. And then what's great is that the cloud functionality of the playback app and multi-tracks, it all syncs up. So then it sends a notification, at least it's supposed to. It wasn't sending a notification to me, but it would just update after a couple seconds. And then I would see all the cues loaded into the app here. So kind of the elephant in the room here is that this workflow is really efficient if you've already built a lot of your cues out in Ableton Live, or even if you're gonna start doing this from scratch. It's great if you have Ableton because, you know, I've got the song up here. I can listen to my original MP3, and then I can go along and drop in my slide cues from ProPresenter, as well as for my lighting scenes and my timeline. And then once that's done, getting it into the multi-track ecosystem is very simple. Let's say though you don't have Ableton Live or any other DAW that's making MIDI clips. This is where it gets a bit clunky for the workflow, and it's going to require work and time on your part if this is the route you want to go. So hit the plus icon here, you know, just for the sake of, well, let's go to a different song. Let me I'll find a song that I haven't done. Let's go to Found in You. So in order to build out these cues, I would actually have to do it manually here inside the software, and Multitracks has tutorials on how to do that. But again, it's a little clunky. You go in, you add your lyrics cue, and then you have to really do it on a time code basis. They've already saved you some time. They selected the right note for the ProPresenter cue. You just have to change the velocity for each one, and you have to play the song, you know, the audio of the song from your app, see what the time code is, and then you have to put the right lyric cue slides at the right time in the song, and then you'll save it. It'll be saved, it'll update in your cloud, and then you'll be able to pull those cues into the playback app. So it's pretty easy to do. It's just going to be a little tedious, especially as you build out your cues in your library. Next, let's take a look at the Prime app and how they go about doing this. So it's really interesting. They kind of went about this whole thing with a different approach. Rather than having you edit the cues in the cloud and then having it update to the app, you can actually add the cues into the app itself. So you pull up a song, you got to have a Prime Pro account. Same thing with the playback. You have to have their whatever their Pro account is, like $7 or $10, somewhere there a month. And then, but in the Prime app, I'm gonna go in here, I'm gonna hit edit song, and then I'm gonna hit edit MIDI cues. So this is kind of the feature going on here. I'll zoom in, and then you'll see I already added some cues in here. Oops, and I just adjusted a cue accidentally by swiping through. So I'm not even sure if that's in the right spot yet. But I'm going to go ahead, and I have the song and other in the fire here. So, you know, the way this works is, you know, I go through, I play through the song, and I didn't even do this through the whole song because it's going to take some time to do it, and I don't need to do it. But I'm going to go ahead and hit press play here. So there's a clear all there. So I'm going into verse 2 right here. So I need a cue like right before verse 2, and that's going to be slide 11 in ProPresenter. So I'm going to go ahead and double click this, and then I'm going to go to G-1, and then velocity 11 for slide 11. And now when I play, there's the cue. Then here's the next one. Oh, I always hit the stop button and it brings it all the way back, and I gotta hit the pause button. But that would be, let's say the second cue has to go here. I'll double click here. Same thing. G1 and then 12, save. And then if I need to move it, I can just tap and hold it and move it around. So there's like pros and cons to each of these workflows. I feel like if each of these app had the feature that the other one has and is missing, they would both be much more efficient or a little bit more user-friendly. So with Prime, it's a little bit, like I said, clunky is the best word I come up with, to kind of go through the song and have to go through and then pick the right note and pick the right velocity and all that. Like, again, it's pretty straightforward, but it's going to be tedious. Just prep yourself for however long it's going to take to do that for all the songs in your library. And then for playback, kind of the downside is like you have to go back to the cloud software in the web browser to make any tweaks or changes. But the upside to that is that you can take pre-made cues from something like Ableton and upload it, and bam, in a couple seconds, it's there and it's ready to go. And I wanted to show you one thing I think that the Playback app definitely has an edge on over the Prime app, as well as this is something that it can do very easily that you can do it in Ableton, but it's just a whole lot more work to set this up. And this is having dynamic cues, both from a guide cue standpoint, and Prime does this as well, but they have also got this set up for your MIDI cues, and this is pretty neat. So especially if you're the type who likes to randomly skip around songs. I don't. We pretty much play the song, the arrangement it's got to be. But watch what happens. I'll go ahead and demonstrate this to you here. Let's pretend like we're at the end of verse 1 in King of My Heart, and I'll go ahead and press play. When it gets to the end of this verse, I'm going to actually have it go back to the beginning of verse 1, but you'll notice it's basically going to ignore the cues on the last measure of verse 1, so that you're not going to see the slide for the chorus come up at the end of verse 1. You're going to see the slides for the beginning of verse 1 come up for the beginning of verse 1, if that makes any sense. So this is a very little thing. I'm really impressed that they built this into it, because this makes it super flexible. So I'm going to go ahead and play the end of this verse for you, and that's going to repeat. So I'll hit the repeat sign here. Oh, he is my song. And notice how it pulled up the slides for the beginning of that song section. And you can even see how the MIDI cues change when I hit that repeat. So I hit this repeat sign here on the section, and it knows, hey, pull these MIDI cues from over here before the verse at the end of this verse section, so it properly displays the right lyrics and even the right lighting cue. So that is a very impressive feature with the MIDI automation inside the Playback app. Another thing I'm impressed with the Playback app is they've built in multiple MIDI buses. So here you can see you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 MIDI buses, which if you're looking in Ableton Live, it's like having 8 MIDI tracks available to send to different destinations, and that's just a very important feature. Prime app does not have that functionality yet. I'm sure they're probably going to add that functionality to it, but you go here in the settings and pretty much you just tell it where to send the MIDI cues. So both of these apps have their pros and cons and how they went about adding this feature, and I hope that gives you just a good sense of which one would be best for your own preferences and workflow. So next, I want to spend some time talking about comparing these apps now to Ableton Live. If you're using Ableton Live on a regular basis, like myself, my team, is it worth switching to one of these apps to run your click and tracks and automate everything? Once again, a lot of this comes down to workflow. So here is my Ableton Live full set list in front of me. And one of the main reasons why I'm sticking with Ableton Live, at least for the time being, is that I really, really like the ability to view my whole worship service in one timeline. With these apps, you're kind of viewing just each song one at a time. And that's great. It makes it really simple and clean to work the software. But in worship, there's a lot of important things that happen outside of the songs, whether that's song transitions or maybe there's other particular cues that have to happen, during announcements, during the sermon, with bumper videos. And we use Ableton Live to a really heavy extent to carry the burden of that and to just be able to craft and curate that experience. And as someone who's done just a lot of automation over the past few years, one of the great things about Ableton Live and its workflow is that in this case, you look at some of these other apps and in general, they're usually quicker at being able to throw together, your sessions, like your click and tracks. But when it comes to actually building out your automation cues for lyrics or lighting or anything else, Ableton Live, it's actually much quicker and much more straightforward to do that and to start building out this automation. So you pull up the browser window over here, and then I have my templates for my ProPresenter cues. I have Proclaim cues as well. We also have our lighting cues. So I can just go in here and go into my light key cues, just drop that down, and then I can look at the different cues we have going here, and I can just drag in whatever lighting scene I need to at any part of the timeline. So it's just really quick to be able to add another cue, to go in here and just make changes. Often there just might be a mistake. Maybe there's the wrong cue for the wrong thing, and it's just really important to be able to address those things quickly during rehearsal. And since we have one long contiguous timeline in the set list, and I can completely control exactly when everything happens, especially in those transitional moments, there's just some subtle things. Like, look at this at the beginning of the song Living Hope. We'll start the song a couple measures ahead of the actual stems for that song, the backing track stems. So my timeline is not really linked at all to just the timeline of the individual songs, but it's this one master timeline that I'm working on. And that gives me the ability when we start this song to, bring our house lights down to the worship setting, black out the stage lights, blank out the screen, change the MIDI patch or the main stage patch a couple bars ahead of time before the song actually starts. So there's just a lot of subtle things in here that Ableton gives you definitely a bit of an edge to have more control and customization. And one last thing I want to point out are just some of the cues that we've built in for different sections of the service. We've got the bumper video cue, the sermon cue, the host cue. We have another Ableton project in our tech booth that's able to trigger this project and get those cues going. And not that it's impossible to set these things up in either playback or prime. I think you could. It would just be a bit clunky in how you actually go through and execute those cues at the proper time. So what I'm trying to say here is you're able to just work with a bigger canvas, so to speak, as you build out your service, as you build out your cues, and you can really get in there and dial things in timing-wise. Making these changes on the fly is also very quick and efficient, especially when it comes to making any production cue changes on the fly. So those are some of the reasons why our team is going to stick with using Ableton, why I'm going to keep recommending that folks use it if they really want to have just high control over a tracks rig that can be not only something to run a backing tracks, but also be their whole production hub for worship. My final word of advice, if you're a diehard playback or prime user, is to just consider the fact that it's still going to take you time to build out all these cues. So make sure you allot enough time, especially as you start building cues for these songs for the first time. And then also consider the fact that it could be very easy to be kind of completely locked into either one of these ecosystems because at least as of right now, you don't really have the ability to download any of the MIDI cues that you're building into your multi-track songs. The same thing in your Prime Cloud. Maybe they could add that feature in there, but you just have to know if you choose to go one of these routes, you're really going to be investing more time into one of these two ecosystems. And I don't think there's going to be any major headaches caused by that down the road if you're okay with sticking with whatever that app is forever. But the thing with Ableton, it's kind of like this neutral third-party software where you have complete control over all of your cues, all of your audio. It's all stored locally. You don't have to worry about a cloud. So definitely for the pro users, I would definitely recommend sticking with this route. But it doesn't mean I would never recommend going with the Prime and Playback apps for automation. It could be cool if you even built out a lot of your cues in Ableton, maybe you use Ableton on a regular basis, but then maybe some Sunday your main tracks person, if it's you, the worship leader, or someone else is out, and you just want to be able to have a simple way to run a click and tracks as well as the automation cues. You could easily, export your MIDI cues and put them into the Multitracks cloud and pull them in the Playback app. So there's a lot of cool things that can be done here, and I'm super impressed with both the team at Loop Community and the team at Multitracks for coming out with this feature, because I see it all the time. More and more worship leaders are discovering the power of implementing automation in their worship gathering. So I want to encourage you, just go ahead and try it. Just stop thinking about it and try it, whether that's with the Prime app, with the Playback app, whether you want to get into Ableton. Just go ahead and start automating things in your worship service. It's going to eliminate a lot of distracting mistakes, and it's going to greatly expand your creative capability. And be sure to let me know below in the comments of this video. I think over the next couple months, we're going to hear from a lot of power users from both of these apps. So the comments of this video could be a really great place to share your experience building out your workflow and building out these cues for automation. Just let us know, like, what do you like, what you don't like, and then hopefully both the teams who built these apps can also refer to this video and your comments to know what type of changes or adjustments they need to make. If you want our recommendations on all of our favorite gear and software for worship, make sure you click the link below that links you to our worship ministry toolkit. It's a huge spreadsheet covering everything. Whether it's a tracks rig, whether it's these other pieces of software or gear that we recommend for just really building a robust and integrated tech system for your ministry. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, hit that thumbs up button and share it with your friends in ministry. You can check out some related videos right on over here. And don't forget to subscribe to the Churchfront channel so you can continue to receive all of our latest videos to help you grow yourself and grow your worship ministry.